Oh, King Cole was a merry old soul.
Award-winning actor, producer, and writer, Patrick Kilpatrick have over 200 film and TV credits and has worked with legends like Steven Spielberg.
I'd like to start by making you aware that you're an enemy combatant.
Known for his iconic villain roles with stars like Van Damme, Tom Cruise, Bruce Willis, to name a few. In 2018, Kilpatrick released a book called Dying for Living. His career accolades include the People's Choice Award at the 2015 Action on Film Festival and a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Dream Machine International Film Festival. In this episode, we'll explore his fascinating journey, his take on creativity, resilience, and the evolving landscape of filmmaking. Patrick, it's a wide experience you're bringing to this podcast, and I'm honored to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on your effort. Um, I don't have a podcast myself. I just seem to appear on everybody else's.
I see. Well,
Not
there must be a
everybody's,
reason
but
then.
a lot of them. It's always good. It's a way to converse with the outside world.
You're having a diverse career, from acting to writing, directing, and exploring different aspects of the industry, right? So I'd like to start on your career as an actor, and
Sure.
then we'll navigate other topics, and I hope you can guide me and bring anything to the table that you want, right?
Sure.
In my opinion, you've had a quite unique path in Hollywood. You've played major, let's call it bad guy roles, right? Antagonist. Um, how do you make such characters compelling and relatable?
Well, each one is different.
Mhm.
So there's so many factors that go into it. There's a central way of working I have, which involves landscape. What are the objects, people, places, actions that take place in the text, and then
Mhm.
um, I call it landscape, and then there's the memorization of the words. Then there is what's called subtext, which is very important, which is where most people who act um, fall short, or they try, or young actors, they don't put as much attention to the subtext, what is actually being said underneath the lines, the emotional power of the lines. Then I have a technique I use called the speed through, which you say the lines so fast that it's almost unintelligible, but it front loads everything into your head. And then um, I have a thing I call the click, where you've learned all the lines and you know everything that's happening on the part. Um, but a click is something outside of that work, and maybe it's a person or an animal or something that kind of brings it together and gives it a characterization, solidification, if you will,
Mhm.
um, for that. And then, I'll give you an example. Like if you watch Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, I would call his click the fact that he was Keith Richards. He was taking from Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And like I once played a Scottish gangster, and I learned all the lines, and I learned all the landscape, and did the speed throughs, and all of that, and the subtext. And then I said, oh, well, this is Susan Boyle, who was the Scottish singer who was on um,
I know.
Oh, yeah, and it kind of, it's not that I be channeled her or anything, but just the fact that I embraced her into the fabric of the work, that really helped. Then there's another set of circumstances that occurs when you get on the set.
Hmm.
Uh, have you ever seen a comedian who gets on a set and they gets on uh, at a venue where they're appearing, and they look out and they look at the audience and they look at the environment and maybe the drinks that the club is being served and everything, and then they make jokes that have to do with the fabric of that moment, the
Hmm.
moment in time that they're in. And so that's called improvisational. So you're being improvisational within the set of circumstances. Maybe I'm on the set and there's a jar, or there's a weapon or another actor or something, but you're playing off all of that. So you're doing all of that thing to work. And that's something that happens in the immediate. Um, Now, as far as bad guys go, um, you over the years you read all the books about what are the psychological um, motivations for people, because we're all motivated by what we do. Most, like 90% of all bad people, quote unquote bad people, are abused themselves in their earlier life. I mean, there's a cycle of abuse. I just played a pedophile priest in in a thing coming out called Catalyst, and the
Okay.
study of uh, pedophilia was very interesting because for me because it's uncomfortably close to the motivations that we have for all the things that we do, like overeating or taking drugs or drinking or sex addiction, or um,
Hmm.
there lives within us all these motives that come from our childhoods that cause us to do certain behaviors,
Hmm.
exhibit rage on the road when you're driving, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. And so we all think of pedophilia as a horror, an abhorrent, and those people are accountable for what they do. However, the motives that drive them are uncomfortably close to things that drive a lot of people towards a
Hmm.
lot of different behavior. Um,
Yeah.
One final thing about it, then I'll also be aware of what is going on in the cinematic universe
Hmm.
and the
Well.
art universe, as
Hmm.
far as villains and things like that are acting and stuff like that.
Yeah. I have to say that with time I've come to I would say maybe better understand or learn to enjoy the story of an antagonist. It's true that maybe in the last 10 years, 15 years, we are seeing in the film industry more and more stories about those antagonists and its origins, right? Those origins, as you were saying, they have story, they have something, some experience that drove those people to become what they are. And that doesn't necessarily is linked to it, not only bad guys, but anyone, maybe successful business people had also those experiences in the childhood,
Sure.
right? That drive that maybe that hunger or that desire to do more, right? So whatever we experience as child, and that drives the whole journey in our lives, let's say. So you've touched several points on how you build those characters and how you've built them and maybe working towards not being the typical stereotype of a bad guy, which is super interesting. And that takes me to ask you also, you've been involved in so many movies, in so not only movies but in TV series and so on, in so many experiences that you've come across, and it's obvious, you've come across with so many talents. What can you tell me about those experiences with directors, maybe like Spielberg, or action lead roles, lead protagonists? What can you tell me about those days?
Well, uh, I literally could tell you. I mean, I have written a second book about those experiences. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of experiences there that are in the second book. Fortunately or unfortunately, I got so busy with COVID, with script writing and producing and film finance and distribution and everything else, that I have yet to polish that book, although it's written completely. I need to revisit it to make sure that it's completely contemporary and completely what I want to say. But um, uh, so I will get to that. Working with Steven Spielberg was really magnificent on a lot of levels, because certainly that's sort of the apex economic level of the business. Uh, there's that, and creatively, I think, in a lot of ways. Now, um, so by apex economically, I mean like the day that you get the job. My first day on the set, they were offering us all leases for brand new Lexuses, because they were a co-partner with the production. So you're getting a free lease, and uh, so, and the food is magnificent, and the quality of the production people, from Janusz Kaminski, the cinematographer, and everybody who's working on it, is, I always model, I try to model um, now my productions so they function like Spielberg, in the sense that you get the finest people possible. And in some cases, we have Spielberg people who are working on our projects at Uncommon Dialogue Films. Everybody very quietly and politely, generally, goes about their business and is so skilled at their um, different departments, that uh, there's no shouting, there's no upheavals or dramas or everything. Everybody's so skilled at their business. Um, Now, that doesn't mean that they're not individuals. Janusz Kaminski is an extraordinarily amazing, wonderful person, his DP, and is sort of quite the opposite of Steven Spielberg, in that he's quite profane. You know, he teases you, and by saying some of the worst things in the world that could possibly be said to you, because that's his personality, and he wants to see how you're going to respond to it. But it's all comes out of a certain joy that he has, or his particular. So, like he would say, really incredibly profane things to me as I would come on the set. And then so I began to call him Light Boy, so to sort of, he wants you to give the insults back to him. So I would call him Light Boy. But Stephen is a very, very, and I don't know even if they like me to talk about them, but Stephen is a very uh, good, raconteur, storyteller. He would tell stories about um, early Hollywood directors that he worked with and things, smoke cigars, and I found him to be a person wanting to be liked and likable. He was very complimentary about stuff that we were doing. He said, "Patrick, you should do more comedies," because of some of the ways that I was delivering the lines. Sometimes he was like a kid in the candy store with Tom Cruise. But you have to understand, I mean, that I consider the whole Minority Report thing a true Hollywood moment because my agent just called up and said Steven Spielberg called and hired you for four months. I didn't even have to audition or meet him. He saw me in some James Cameron work that I did, and so he literally plucked me out of other work that I was doing. So I've always been very grateful, and of course his lineup of films is stunning. I mean, his level of storytelling is magnificent. So I'm a big fan. I have a lot of adventures on that set. They're all in my book.
Okay. I'll be the, I mean, I'll be the first
All in my
in
book.
getting hands into
I
that
just have
book.
to publish the second half. I might do it after I'm dead, though.
Amazing, amazing. So let me ask you this, because earlier you mentioned that you've had so much work since COVID. So was it back then when you thought stronger into transitioning to a new moment into writing and directing? Have you always thought about that? How was that transition and how is it going?
Jeremias, that's how you pronounce your name, right? Jeremias?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
perfect.
Jeremias. Um, Writing preceded acting for many, many years. I started writing when I was a teenager, and I was also acting in the sense that I was performance as an athlete. So, because it's very close performance as an athlete to acting.
Hmm.
Um, so I've always been acting and performing and writing. Since a very, very early age, like the age of 8, I was playing sports, and you're playing in front of people. But then the writing, I did it as a teenager, and I did it as when I was at university, and then
Hmm.
I did it professionally for 13 years after I got out of university, along with bodyguarding, which is sort of a form of performance as well. So for rock groups, so I had a very high level writing, journalism, and advertising career even before I found my way to acting.
Hmm.
So in some ways, I wrote my way into the entertainment business as a playwright, and so. How did I? What was the question? How did I transition at COVID? I,
Yeah,
I,
well, I,
I've been writing scripts on assignment for other people for decades. So when I was a journalist, you write the copy and then you perform it in front of the camera on the story. You do the research, you write the script, and then you memorize it sort of, and you talk about it, or you do it off the cuff.
mhm.
So it's really not so different. And you're always going into different levels and different areas of human activity. For film producing, you're moving into distribution and film finance and marketing. I was always into marketing. I wrote advertising. I mean, I wrote publicity. I wrote journalism. I saw a sport I liked and I played the sport, and then I wrote an article on it for magazines. Uh,
Hmm. I'd say among the most interesting and unexpectedly interesting movies I've ever seen were about advertisement. Yeah.
Advertising is a tremendous, tremendous industry.
Yeah, it is. It
And,
is.
and there's so many creative people in advertising.
Yeah,
Now,
they,
yeah, I felt incredibly blessed to get out of university and work on things like relaunching Life magazine, um, and doing fashion ads for Givenchy and Maud Frison, and all kinds of cycle magazine, photography magazine, skiing magazine, all the things I like to do at that time, ski, motorcycles. Uh, I worked on things I didn't necessarily like Modern Bride. I did advertising for Modern Bride, Cosmo magazine. And that was when magazines really were the powerhouse of media. Now, of course, everything is online mostly, but there's still hard handheld magazines that do pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. There are. That takes me to another topic I wanted to bring up, which is and you've mentioned Spielberg's experience on that, which I'm very curious. That in the sense of that you've learned from there, and how you're approaching the business side of the film, right? Because of course there's obviously the creative part, the storytelling, what's to be told, but then it's a marketing, it's the advertisement, it's a production, it's a financing. So how do you balance that business side with the creativity?
Very well. Um,
That's the question, the
you,
answer
you,
possible.
uh, you must do that. Just like you must um, look, there's a lot of leeways to do it in your own way, but you have to balance your family's finances and you have to balance your, so it's similar things, and you have to be adaptable and you have to be not spending, overspending of money. Spielberg, you mentioned Spielberg, but Spielberg is probably the most frugal big budget director I've ever seen. I mean, he has no problem going around and boom, 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 and boom, cut that whole scene. Okay. He acts like it's his own money, you
I
know?
see.
And so if you think of it, Spielberg's not a guy who does the James Cameron 500 million project. Most
Hmm.
of his movies run in the area of, I don't know, 70 to 120, $130 million, something like that.
Hmm.
I don't know the exact figures of every single one of his movies,
Of
but
course.
I saw him cut huge sections, and who's going to tell Steven Spielberg to cut a scene? But he operates very, for a big budget director, very frugally. Um, as if it's his own money, and I think that's the way. That's a good way
The way
to
to
to work. You know, so many people. You have to have a conception. In fact, one of the guidelines of how we work is how do we advance the production value of the effort, the film, and
hmm
and make it more original, more unique, so that you're creating something that hasn't been visited on the screen before. It's a guideline by which we operate.
Okay. And talking about guidelines of creativity, um, what do you think about risks? What's a risk that you've taken and it has paid off?
Uh, well, I don't believe in negative events, so I think every risk I've taken has paid off. Um,
Hmm.
you know, you'd have to say, what's a risk that's paid off? It's certainly a risk to go into acting at 32. It's certainly a risk to go into film production later. I mean, every day we face risks. It's a risk to love someone. It's a risk to raise children. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you? It's a great blessing, and there's a lot of fun and heartbreak and challenge and things like that involved in all of it. But it's a risk to run for governor, which I did. You
You
know,
did. You did.
it's a risk. Risk is part of life. Um, you don't want to be operating out of fear. Um,
Definitely not.
you know, you want to be operating out of exhilaration. I would say the human condition is a risk because none of us are going to get out of here alive. So you better, um, uh,
Better enjoy the ride.
I think you have to have calculation and you have to have risk and you have to have study and slow and methodical and fast and furious and all of this stuff all at once, you know.
And phrasing you at the beginning of this podcast, surrounding by the best, right? Make get the best team and take care of them. You know, with all were mentioning all the sleasings or the food, right? That put effort into taking care of that team as well, right? So they elevate you,
Right.
you elevate them in the film industry, in any industry, most likely. Yeah. If I
One
can
of the
add something.
things I am taking a risk now, because it's not a risk, it's growth, is not to react to anything. And this
Hmm.
is something, not to react to anything with overt anger or anything like that, no matter what happens. That's what I'm really trying to cultivate in my daily life, you know,
I,
because
hmm.
anger doesn't do you much good anyway. It just removes you out of. So I think I heard the other day, anger removes you from wisdom.
Oh, that's deep. Okay, I'll note that
Well,
down.
it does. There's no question anger provides adrenaline. And
It
so
does.
it's interesting in that sense of the word. You can be exhausted, and if you suddenly get angry, you're, you've
Yeah.
got a burst of energy. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that anger is very rarely the right way to go.
It takes you this far, right? Not where you want to be, most likely.
It
If
takes
I
you
can add something, because I
takes
feel
you out of
very much related.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
takes you out of joy. It takes you out of calculation.
Yeah.
It takes you out of communication to some extent.
Yeah.
Um,
About risks, I couldn't agree more. I used to work in a bank,
yeah,
that stereotype, like super, for like 7 years, and when I decided to go into the wild and co-found a company, um, all my friends were asking me like, "Hey, are you mad? Are you mental? You have you just had your first kid. He's like 3 months old. You have a good salary, good position in the bank, and are you thinking in launching a tech startup? I mean, are you crazy?" I'm like, the the main reason I'm doing that, it's because I have a kid, right? I need to put me there and put him there. So risks, we live in risk. That's it.
yeah, you
You,
and you will. You're touching on something I think you'll really benefit from, because when my first son was born, I I had gotten into some, I sometimes take opportunities, risks. I started buying land in Colorado, and I didn't have a lot of money. I would buy a land, secure it from the
Mhm,
original ranchers, and
mhm,
because I knew this place was going to explode. I
mhm,
had been to Aspen in the 70s. I knew Telluride, Colorado, was going to explode. I just looked at it. And so I took a little bit of money and I bought land, secured it, and I had 60 days to come up with the 20% of the price.
down payment. Yeah.
So I'm really out on a limb. And then I sold it to actors and directors and sports figures that I knew in LA. I made them partners, and they would
I
come
see.
in with the 20%. And we all did really, really well on it. And I bought a house in Santa Barbara with my profit from all of that over 4 years. And
Beautiful.
yeah, and then I gave the house to my ex-wife. But that's okay, because my kids grew up in that house, and they
Yeah.
benefited from the school district and everything, and it worked really, really, really well. So it was risky, but I remember looking at my little boy, and he was like, I had a. By the way, there was a worldwide real estate recession the moment I bought all this land.
Hmm.
I mean, the whole market in real estate crashed all over the world. If it hadn't been Telluride, Colorado, we weathered the storm. But I remember I had $1 million of land that I had bought on credit. Basically, I owned $1 million, and
Mhm.
I. But I would look at my little son who had just been born, and he would grin up at me. And it was impossible to be sad or to be fearful,
Yeah.
because that was what was really, really important. So, yeah, congratulations on to your friend, whoever was having. This was you that you were doing the opening the tech company.
Yeah.
Congratulations! You see, I think that's a perfect time to have a child
Yeah. Yeah. Agree. Agree.
and to open your business.
Yeah. And it's that brings me to the following topic, which is resilience and legacy and impact, right? So looking at your I'd say journey. I cannot say career in that sense. It's your journey that you've done so many things before acting, then acting, now being in every single part of the film industry. I'd say, um, what's next?
Well, what's next is I'm probably going to go in and lie down next to my wife and watch and relax a little bit. We're in the midst of polishing a script. Um, there are daily communications around um, bringing film financing to the table. I never know what's next as far as an actor because that comes from the outside world. Uh, Basically, today I'm going to be taking it fairly easy. Tomorrow I have a couple of standard medical procedures, and you have to fast before them. So I have to drink juices and things like that.
Hmm.
But what's next is for Uncommon Dialogue Films is a slate of films that we spend enormous amounts of time, not just me. It's very important to have a team, and I have a great team. My wife, my co-producing partner, Raffaello, Maria Samoloiva, who is returning from the Ukraine tomorrow after a long reunion, a long gap in seeing her family.
I see.
And she's been over there for 3 weeks, and she finally became a legal resident of America, so she was able to leave and now
Hmm.
can come back. We have a whole long list of things to catch up with her.
Busy
On
days, yeah.
October 9th, there's a premiere in Beverly Hills at the Fine Arts Theater of a mixed martial arts western.
Okay.
Although I'm known for playing uh, uh, villains and iconic villains, I play a noble sheriff, the brother of Cynthia Rothrock, in her mixed martial arts western. Great concept, and I have incredible respect for Cynthia because she and her producing partner and significant other, Robert Clancy, uh, they raised a huge amount of money, relatively speaking, for the movie on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and
Okay.
they ran a fantastic production. So the importance of that, and I think it's unprecedented, is what Cynthia did with her fan base and the interest in retro mixed martial arts.
Okay.
So that's
That,
called Black Creek. That's October 9th. We just wrapped production on a movie called The Whole Shot, which was directed by my dear friend and wonderful former French commando turned actor director Olivier Gruner. The Whole
hmm
Shot's a sex trafficking uh, jet ski French commando movie, which is really fun, super fun to do, starring myself and Olivier and Laura Auclair and
I see.
Jesse Cove, who's very much an actor coming up. Son of one of the great joys, Andreas, is I get to work with the sons and daughters of people that I worked with many years ago. And Jesse
Okay.
is the son of Marty Cove, who's of course on Cobra Kai. Catalyst, there's a movie called Catalyst. We talked about that where I play the pedophile priest. That's coming out later on this month. And currently on streaming is Nessie about the Loch Ness Monster. It's a family picture. Anybody can watch it.
Okay.
Um, I just got back from Germany, and in the relaunch of a movie I did 35 years ago called The Cellar, which is we call it a family horror picture. It's kind of a horror picture if Disney was doing horror pictures. Um,
I see.
and so I had a lot of fun in Germany. We've got a project I'm buffing up, and we're getting ready for filming in Germany. Um, there's all the productions to get going. So there's basically all
Super,
the functions of a studio.
super busy days ahead. That's what it's ahead. What that's
Always
what.
busy. You know, I spoke the other night at an event called the Heart of Hollywood, and I was speaking on breaking barriers and communing with masters. And a lot of people seem to get hurt by like the strike. Okay, they get
Yeah.
hurt. The truth is there are no negative events. So what for me and my team, what did we do? We honed our packages. When they don't hunt whales that anymore, thankfully, but they some countries do. But uh, a whaler in between hunting whales, what does he do? He darns his sails, he sharpens his harpoon. So there's always something to do, no matter what the events. I mean, I work just as hard or harder when I'm not acting
Yeah.
than when I am, because I'm doing all the myriad things to do with the film business. It's also a time to be engaged in the lives of our country and the life of the earth. Um, we have an election coming up here
Yes.
in a few weeks. So um, one can choose to be engaged in that, or there's charities to be involved in.
Mm-hmm.
So one can be involved. I'm very involved in the lives of our children and our grandchildren. So there's a lot to do, plenty to do. And there's in that, the key is to enjoy it all. The key is to get some joy out of it and
It
to
is.
grow and live within this circumstance we call life.
It is. I heard the other day a quote. Was not the first time I heard it, but society is doing well when elderly people put seeds that will grow into trees that they will not experience their shade.
Say that again.
So the quote was, "A society is doing well. You can tell a society is doing well when old people
Old people are
are
doing well.
are putting seeds of trees that will grow, and they will not experience shade, but their grandchildren and so on, right? So that's what we have to do. You mentioned one thing that amazed me. I was not expecting that. You mentioned that the financing of a film you co-produce and you're part of did a fundraise in Indiegogo and
Yeah, that
crowdfunding.
was Cynthia's Black.
That takes me to what challenges do you see in modern filmmaking in regards of 20, 30, 40 years ago?
Well, film finance is always a challenge until it's not. Gaining access for young actors in auditions is a challenge until it's not. Uh, um, there are challenges every day. It's how you like. We were. I have written this script, and my wife and I were working on it yesterday, and there was a section. I don't know whether it's because the internet is caught up and changed since when I first started on it, but there was a part that wasn't historically correct,
Mm-hmm.
and we wanted it to be historically correct as well as great entertainment to watch. And so I had to do research and meet that little challenge, which was to find something that was adaptable to the work we had already done. Um, what are the challenges for filmmaking? The challenges for filmmaking are, I first of all have a plan for the return of the money and
Definitely.
getting people into a landscape of profit. It's called the film business. Don't be just concerned selfishly in getting your film funded. Because one of the biggest challenges in film funding is there are all these people out there that have wanted to help, but they've run into people who treated them badly, either through incompetence or lack of integrity. One of the challenges of living in modern life is that we don't have as visionary and as dedicated leaders as we need, because we need leadership and vision on every level of human activity. There's a lot of great people, but we have leaders who are self-serving, and that's not the way leadership is. Leadership is to not be self-serving. It's a delicate balance. You don't want to have yourself destroyed, but you also want to lead from the front and lead with vision and power. So filmmaking, just as I don't believe in negative events, I don't believe that there are challenges that can't be overcome with love, with hard work, with exploration. Certainly it takes hard work and a knowledge of what's going on in the world about you, and you have to keep up with everything that you're keeping pace with. But there's a place for everybody. You could be a little person who just stays in and writes wonderful scripts, and if the good universe wants you to those scripts to see the light of day, they will. Or you could do a YouTube channel, or you could do whatever. It comes down to personal accountability and personal responsibility for what you're doing.
There's a place for everybody. I'd say I agree, but I'm experiencing something different. Personally, I struggle sometimes to find something that I know I like, to find it available, So when you're talking about financing, I'm also thinking about how to reach the audience, right? We live in a world that potentially anyone could talk to anyone, and still we're not seeing everything everywhere.
Well, look, what are their challenges? People's attention span is very short. So I know there are a lot of big time directors who are wondering, how do I communicate to people who are TikTokers? How do I communicate with people like that? Well, you could choose to do. I don't think big form films are going away, and I think the TikTok thing is great, and there are people devoting their whole lives to short, tiny little Instagram posts. One of my sons is so brilliant at doing exactly that. It doesn't make me want to go away from the large form of a movie, because I think there's a market and an audience for large forms of movies. But do I admire that short form skill? Sure. I want to know about it. I want to know how to do it. I want to do all different kinds of things. But my central aspiration is much larger narrative fictional films. Am I aware of documentaries? Of course I am. We're talking about people doing documentaries to complement the promotion of our larger projects. So challenges. What are the challenges ahead?
Well, you've
It's
mentioned
always challenging to convince other people until it's not, to give you millions and millions of dollars to do a project.
Yeah, it is. Well, Patrick, I appreciate very much your time and your detailed answers to my questions. Maybe we can wrap it up here as we
Yeah.
about the podcast.